So, but that kind of transitions, Vince, into the next part of our matchup, which is the matchup of Notre Dame rushing offense against the Wisconsin rushing defense. And this is this one is where what you were just getting ready to dive into is going to show itself more than any other area.
Well, and again, Notre Dame's scheme for running the ball is not complicated at all. It's a scheme where you need effort and you need fun to be fundamentally sound. That's really all there is to it. Now, I say that's all there is to it, but Notre Dame can't do it all the time. So there's obviously more to it for them. But when I watched Wisconsin play and I saw the manner in which their front seven played, against Penn State, they brought 4 and 5 guys a lot, and they brought that 5th guy from a myriad of places. Mm-hmm. And there were many times where that guy came loose, and that was against Penn State's offensive line, and that scares me.
Which is a very veteran group.
Right, that scares me about Notre Dame's front, and if they're going to be able to pick up some of that. There was a lot of delayed blitzes. There was a lot of where the end would occupy the tackle, and then the outside linebacker would come around the outside untouched and for a sack. They're
one of the better run blitzing teams in the country.
Yes, and it's very clear. And they hide it very well too. I mean, they're just really, really good at it.
Now, what we're talking about is it's some people call them stunts. I call them blitzes because I don't think blitzes are just for passing downs.
Sure.
Because you don't always know if they are going to run or pass on most first and second down plays. A run blitz or a run stunt is essentially it's their opportunity to say, okay, we're going to attack your gaps and make sure that we can get gap integrity or even again they want to get penetration in a lot of instances with bringing different guys. Being a 3-4 team in Wisconsin is a 3-4 team, and they are a traditional 3-4 team, and at least in the front three, Vince, and that they got big boys that are going to eat up blocks. And then that allows their linebackers to play downhill and play fast. And so that's certainly something that we're going to see. Their defensive line, their starting defensive line, Matt Hennison is 291 pounds. Isaiah Mullins is 297. Those are their defensive ends. Their nose tackle, Keanu Benton, is 317 pounds. Their second-string offensive line, their quote-unquote small guy is Rodis Johnson, who's from Michigan. That is a name a lot of people that follow Notre Dame recruiting are going to remember. Notre Dame did look at him. There was a time when it looked like Notre Dame was going to get him, but they went in a different direction and brought in some different players and ended up getting better players, in my opinion. He's 286. He's their small guy in their rotation. They also have Bryson Williams, who's 291, and James Thompson, who's 6'5", 290. So they're very big up front, and their goal is to be physical, is to come off and hit you right in the mouth, try to reset the line of scrimmage in their favor, and then they're going to bring their 3-4 linebackers from all over the place. As you mentioned, Vince, sometimes it's going to be the 2 outside guys will just kind of crash, and so the defensive ends will sort of slant inside. Then occupy the B gaps, and then those outside guys will come off the edge. The nose tackle tries to occupy the A gaps, and then that allows the linebackers to go free. Other times they will drop one of the edge players, or they'll just have those edge players sort of, set the edge. So stay outside if they need to drop for pass. If there's a pass drop, they'll drop, but they're just kind of setting inside. Then the ends are physical at the point of attack, and then the linebackers are crashing.
Yeah,
or maybe just have one linebacker crash. They will also slant, so they'll kind of slant one way and bring the linebackers another way. It's very creative, and it's creative in a very sound manner. That's the thing that I like about it is they're not a team that they're exposed to big plays because they're bringing so many guys. It's a really sound, aggressive defense. And they have, even their linebackers are big, Vince. Leo Chanel's their inside linebacker. He's 261. Jack Sanborn's 236. Noah Burks, who's sort of their, he's kind of more of their field outside guy, and he's sort of their, he'd kind of play almost the role of like a big end in their traditional 4-down. Is 245, and then Nate Herbig is sort of their version of a Viper, I guess, if I'm trying to make it, boundary kind of guy. He's 227, a little bit more athletic, rangier guy. But their whole thing is geared towards stopping the run, and they've been really good at it so far.
What I noticed when I was watching film is they may leave some holes in the passing game when they're bringing their front seven and doing different things with the front seven, but they leave no holes in the run game. And since we're talking about the run game, that's what I want to focus on. They're very fundamentally sound as far as plugging every gap and doing it from different directions and doing it from different angles and changing the eye level of the quarterback and the offensive line and things of that nature. They're very good at that. I think there's ways that you can exploit them in the pass game, but we're not there yet. The run game is going to be very difficult because of the way that they stunt and they move and they fill every single gap. And they don't, at least I didn't notice it in what I was watching, they don't give up the edge very often. They are very good in contain. They're very good at setting the edge. Whatever terminology you want to use, they're pretty darn good.
They want to funnel everything back inside.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you can see it in the numbers of their look in 2019, for example, the last time they had a full season, you had an outside linebacker and an inside line. Outside linebacker led their team with 19 and a half tackles for loss. That was Zach Bond. He played a lot of physical football and was a really good player. But then Chris Orr was an inside linebacker. He had 14 tackles for loss. And then Jack Sanborn, who at the time I believe was a sophomore, had 9 tackles for loss. He had 23 tackles for loss from their inside linebackers. 2018, their two leading tackle for loss guys were their 2 inside linebackers, 11 and a half and 10 tackles for loss. Now, these aren't super athletic guys. They're good football players, don't get me wrong.
But they plug.
The year before that. I mean, all 4 of their starting linebackers in 2017, their 2 outsides and their 2 insides were double-digit tackles for loss. The point being is that their linebackers are going to be making a lot of plays. The defense is designed for their linebackers to make a lot of plays. I'm trying to go back through this, Vince. I can't find the last time a Wisconsin had a pure defensive lineman in double digits. 2014 was the same thing, although it was a different coordinator back then. Yet all 4 linebackers were double-digit tackles for loss. In the Brian Kelly era, Wisconsin has not had a defensive lineman last defensive lineman. Here you go. Last defensive lineman at Wisconsin to have double-digit tackles for loss.
Watt?
Chris Watt.
Yeah, I was going to say that was just a guess off the top of my head, but he's pretty darn good.
Now, again, one of there are 3-4, so you could say, hey, look, like Zach Bond was kind of a defensive. I'm talking about the 3 big boys that they have up front. They are the space eaters. It's meant to let those linebackers run free. That's the point.
Now, let me flip this on its head a little bit. Where Notre Dame can be successful in their run game is if they can get outside, because their linebackers aren't great sideline to sideline. Mm-hmm. They're great. They're Bo Bauer, right? Bo Bauer is actually more athletic than I give him credit for sometimes. But what I'm trying to say is they got a couple, some middle linebackers. They're good at the triangle, right? They're thumpers. They're not great getting outside. So if Notre Dame can get outside, whether they do it with the running backs, whether they do it with the quick pass game, whatever the case may be, because that's an extension of your run game, right? If they can get outside the tackles, they can have some success. I really do believe that because I like Notre Dame's guys in space, and that includes the running backs, more so than I like the linebackers covering them out in space.
Yeah, I think the more you can spread them out, the more creases that you can create, and that's the big thing. And here's where the decisions that Notre Dame has to make this week. Decision number 1 is how can we utilize our run game to protect our pass game, right? Then how can we utilize our pass game to create opportunities in our run game? They're going to have to use the pass to set up the run in this game. Now, what is that? That's to me decision number 1. Or part of decision number 1 is, hey, we're just going to go big and we're going to try to create enough spaces, and try to create enough gaps to where hopefully we can get a body on a body and our running backs can take over, which I think there's some truth to. When you go back. When you go back and look at some of the games where teams have had some success running the football on them, one of the games I was watching earlier today, Vince, was the 2019 Big Ten championship game. Now, that was a game that Wisconsin actually had a lead at halftime on Ohio State. Right. And then Ohio State was able to come out in the second half and get the run game going. What they were able to do was they were able to effectively get to the second level and win some edge blocks. Now, I think Notre Dame has the tackles in the run game to win some edge blocks. That's actually some of the strengths that we have been seeing so far from this group. And it is, I think their tackles is when they've had sort of the bright spots in the run game. The issue has been getting to the second level. Well, we just got done telling you that the linebackers at Wisconsin are the ones capable or are the ones they're going to utilize to really attack the run game. So Notre Dame's going to have to really be on their P's and Q's. And I think one of the things that would be effective in what Ohio State did is when Ohio State had success, they were able to kick out the edge and then seal everyone else inside and then run like counters and then inside zones where they could kind of just down block, kick out, and then just get up in there. I think Notre Dame's going to have some wrinkles to the run game, Vince, where they're creating lanes as opposed to just the zones, because the reality is I don't think, and I hope to be proven wrong. I would love to be proven wrong. I don't think Notre Dame can just line up and push Wisconsin around and run their zones. Last year's offensive line could have.
Yeah.
This year's can't.
Right.
Which means you have to then have some creativity in your run game where you're creating running lanes with, quick traps and pulls and maybe a buck sweep, because you had mentioned wanting to run outside. So, if your tight ends aren't doing a great job blocking right now, then, zone and base blocks, and maybe you can use them to kind of seal down, and then allows you to get outside, have them come from outside and crack down. Maybe you use Kevin Austin's size this week to have him crack down on linebackers. I think there need to be some things like even the quick pitch that Notre Dame had against Purdue on Saturday. First one worked, got 6 or 7 yards, but they're not doing anything, Vince, where they're kind of creating running lanes other than just zone. Right. And I think they're going to have to utilize that to a degree. And, we saw that from Ohio State. We've seen that from some of the few teams that have had success running the ball against them. Ohio State in 2019 ran for 172 yards on them in the championship game, but they ran for 264 yards on them in the first game that they played. And if you look at Wisconsin that year is a strange year. They only gave up over 100 yards rushing 4 times all year. But when teams went over, they were big. Ohio State went for 264 and 172, and then Nebraska went for 273. So it's about creating creases, and Notre Dame's going to have to adapt to do that. If they just try to go big on big, then I don't think that plays right into Wisconsin's hands. If Notre Dame's going to put Joe Alt in the game and go 12, 13 personnel, Wisconsin's already that's a win for them.
That's what they want. They want Notre Dame to do that. Yeah. Because they know, and again, we're going to get to this when we get to the passing side of things, but they know that Notre Dame's got some dudes out on the outside. And I don't care what anybody says, Notre Dame's dudes are better than the secondary that Wisconsin has. And so they want Notre Dame to run the ball. They 100% want Notre Dame to run the ball, because what do you do? Again, I've said this 100 times. What do you do when you're the coordinator? You pick out the weak spot and you go after it. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at Notre Dame's offense and realize the weak spot is the offensive line. So you're going to add a couple guys to that offensive line and in the form of tight ends, and you think that that's going to stop our run defense? Okay, let's go. That's what we want you to do. So I feel like Notre Dame would be playing right into their hands if they go that route, and I would be very disappointed if that was the case. Now, if they think that they want to pick up a yard or two, and it's Brian Kelly talked about those times where everybody in the stadium knows you're going to run the ball, and you run the ball and you still get what you need to get. Okay. If you're confident, okay, but that cannot be the basis for what you want to do to beat this Wisconsin team. It can't be. They have to be able to find a way to run the ball, but they're going to have to do it with more athletes on the field. Yes. Well, like that one, that little pitch thing that Tyler Buckner did, that was designed to get the ball outside. Now, he could have kept it and he could have run depending on what the defensive end did. But that's just an example. It's a replay. Yes, correct. It was an example of a way to get the ball outside quicker. And so it's clear Tommy Rees is thinking about this stuff, which is good. We'll just see what this looks like on Saturday, though. Sorry, Vince. I got locked up. Can you hear me? Yeah. No, I got you. Yes, I didn't hear the last part of what you said. I apologize. Oh, no. I just said that. It's on my end. It froze up. Gotcha. I was just saying that it's clear Tommy Rees is thinking about getting the ball to the outside and ways to get his guys outside faster. And I'm interested to see what that looks like on Saturday.
Yeah, they're going to have some more wrinkles in this game, Vince.
Yes,
there's no question about it. And those wrinkles need to be geared towards attacking outside. And here's why I say you have Notre Dame's going to kind of have to go outside of who they've been for a long time this whole year. And this is a game where it is even more important. What I mean by that is Notre Dame has always kind of been an inside-out team. We're going to start off, we're going to run the ball, we're going to inside zone, and we're going to do this, and then we'll kind of work on building outside. That's not who this team is.
Nope.
You don't have the line for it. And I mean, you just don't have the line for it. I mean, there's no
the sentence ends.
You got the backs and all, you don't have a line for it right now. Okay. Now, if that changes and the line starts playing great, fine. But I don't see them going from what they've been the last 3 weeks, all of a sudden looking like, vintage Notre Dame offensive line. So you have to prepare for that. You can't keep pounding your head saying this is the week they finally don't stink. You have to say, hey, look, here's who we are. So let's put these kids in position to be successful. And what you need to do is you need to get Wisconsin. Normally, I'm against having teams go left, right. When you're playing a team where you clearly have a speed advantage, you need to utilize that. And the reason I say that is your perimeter screens, which are going to require you to be very physical blocking. You're going to have to use those. You're going to have to put some buck sweeps in there. You're going to have to utilize pin and pull stuff. That's what a buck sweep is. A lineman blocks down, the guy that he's on pulls and wraps around, gets outside. You're going to have to use jet sweeps this week. And again, now that means your tight ends and your receivers are going to have to block their butts off this week. Yeah. They're going to have to be on their game. And if they can do that, that's where Notre Dame can get some advantages. Try to find ways to get Braden Lindsey outside. Try to find ways to get Chris Tyree and Kyron Williams on the field together. Use Chris Tyree on some of those jet sweeps, because if you're able to hit one or two, maybe use him on a reverse. If you're able to get their eyes of the Wisconsin linebackers going like this, and if you can, and you say, hey, look, we can keep crashing our inside linebackers, but Notre Dame's just running outside of us all day. Now, all of a sudden, their linebackers can't crash as hard, Vince. Now that's where you have your advantage of saying, hey, okay, now we can find a crease. We've hit them outside enough with our pass game, with our perimeter screens, with our outside running plays, our outside zone. Not stretch, because stretch ain't working because they're not physical enough. I'm talking pure, like get a really good outside zone. They're the same play. Stretch for me is just so people understand. Outside zone and stretch are the same play. For me, it's different because one is sort of a lateral where the guy's trying to get outside. The other one is kind of like a pistol eye thing where you're actually getting more downhill. Same blocking scheme. It's just the running back's angle of attack is different. So that's why I call them two different plays. And so but I'm talking about pure outside zone where you're really trying to get a lateral stretch. You're fast swiping that sucker, really getting outside. That's where you can create some advantages. And if you're able to get them thinking that, now all of a sudden you hit them with a quick inside zone, that inside zone becomes more effective. So you're basically reverse engineering your run game, essentially, is something that I think Notre Dame is going to have to do. Now, if they don't do that and it's just going to come down to, well, we're just going to have to play better this week, they're going to struggle on offense. They're going to have to say, look, here's the strength of our team. It's not those guys up front. It's not. But what do those guys do well? Okay, let's give them some things where we're not asking them to go be last year's unit. Let's ask them, hey, we're going to do some different things. And that's where I think Tommy Rees is really going to make or break his this season is how creative can he get, and then can Jeff Quinn get those guys to go out there and execute it. And then Del Alexander's going to have to get his boys to block. And I'll say, I've been very critical of Del Alexander in a lot of ways. One thing I think his units have always been pretty good at since he got here, they block well.
I agree.
And they give effort in the run game. That's going to have to be at its pinnacle this week against the screens and the perimeter runs. If they can block their butts off outside, Notre Dame's going to have a chance to gash Wisconsin, because that's the key, Vince. You're not going to go 10 plays every time you play Wisconsin. You've got to get the chunk plays, run game and pass game. You need chunk plays against this team.
Yes, no question about it. And I think you're going to get them on the outside. I have a hard time seeing them get those chunk plays on the inside. I really do. Now, if you're gashing them on the outside, now you can go back, just like what you talked about, that reverse engineering. They used to be inside to outside. Now if you can start getting them outside with some screens and some sweeps and some things of that nature, maybe jet sweep, things like that. Well, now they've got to spread out. They have to respect that. They're going to have to add some people out there Now you come back inside and you do your thing. And if that's the case, then the game is headed in Notre Dame's direction anyway.
I want to address something else too, Vince, is I'm seeing a lot of these comments like from Brendan McCarthy. Buckner will keep Wisconsin on their heels, start cone, play tempo, insert Buckner for some RPOs, get some play action going at the cone, set up the run. Some good stuff there. Backdraft says Buckner has to be a big part of this game. Listen, we kind of saw this last week. Tyler Buckner needed to make a guy miss to rip off a 20-yard gain. The rest of the stuff when he was in the game wasn't really effective because they had film on him. Purdue had film on him, right? Tyler Buckner is not the answer in regards to play him more. That's not the answer. The answer is going to have to be about the other skill guys. Now, am I saying that as long as Tyler Buckner's healthy, that he shouldn't be part of the game plan? I'm not saying that at all. But the reality is this is a really well-coached team that will have a Tyler Buckner plan that is going to require more than just running a couple RPOs and read zones. They've seen that before. They play teams in the Big Ten that do that. And so at the end of the day, you're going to have to throw the football to set up the run. And we'll get into that matchup in a second. But there's this thought that because it worked against Toledo, now all of a sudden that's the game plan for Notre Dame. No, it's still going to come down to a creative game plan that is executed well on the perimeter and along the trenches. And I don't care who the quarterback is.
Right.
Just inserting Tyler Buckner into the mix isn't – I mean, look at the success that they had this week when Tyler Buckner was in the game against Wisconsin or against Purdue. He needed to make a great run to get that 20-yard gain. That's where his value comes because Tyler's always capable of that big play. But the more you play him, the more Wisconsin will have a book on him and play him. So not that Tyler Buckner, if healthy, shouldn't be a big part of the game plan from a big play standpoint, but from a volume standpoint, I don't think he's the answer that Notre Dame fans think that he is. At the end of the day, this still is going to come down to your design and your execution up front. That's what this is going to come down to. I don't care who the quarterback is.
Well, just to touch on the Tyler Buckner thing, I mean, everybody does remember that he went out with a hamstring. That's what worries me, is because hamstrings linger. That's all I'm saying. Look at Braden Lindsey, right? It was hamstrings, right? It was those are issues. So what I don't want to see is Notre Dame rush him back in.
They won't.
And injure him longer in the season. That's just my 2 cents to the whole thing.
Because if he's not healthy, they won't play him because it takes away from what makes him effective.
Exactly.
At this point.
That's exactly right.
Now, again, I want people to understand I am not anti-Tyler Buckner.
Me neither.
I think Tyler Buckner's a phenomenal player. We have been calling for a Tyler Buckner package all summer.
Yes, sir.
It's just, again, because it worked against Toledo, there's this notion that that's what it's always going to look like. No, it's not always going to look like that. And especially since, like you said, Vince, he did injure himself, how much are you going to be able to practice that this week?
Right.
But if he is healthy, again, and right now we're just going to work with the assumption he can play.
Oh, yeah. I
think that you have to be smart about how you use him, and upping the volume of how he's in the game isn't the way to go. Somebody had made a point. William Perry said great name, by the way. We'll just call you the Fridge. They need to have Tyler Buckner make some throws, simple throws, but I believe he can catch them off guard. I'm curious as to kind of see if he's able to go. I would like to see them take a shot early with him.
Sure.
That is going to be a big thing for me. But anyway,
that's the next step. I think that's the next step of his package adding.
Right. But at the end of the day, this is going to come down to Tommy Rees coming up with a really good scheme that gets Wisconsin off their game formationally, shift-wise, tempo. I'd love to see some tempo.
I would love that too.
Attack the perimeter, work outside in, kind of flip things up a little bit, work outside in, because Wisconsin is not prepared for Notre Dame to work outside in. They think Notre Dame's just going to do what they do because that's what Notre Dame's done so far.
Yeah.
Those are the things. And then, of course, the line will have to execute whatever that is. That ultimately is going to be the key. Now, if that happens, then Tyler Buckner will be successful. But just like putting this all on Tyler Buckner's shoulders, he's like this – the second coming of John Elway. Well, John Elway got his brains beat in for several years with the Denver Broncos because his offensive line stunk, right? John Elway didn't win a whole lot of games at Stanford. You still need to have those dudes around you. And whether it's Tyler Buckner or Drew Pine or Jack Cohn or Brendan Clark or whoever else, it's going to be It's going to be about the scheme and what they do up front. That's going to be the key. And if they can if they can execute up front, be physical, execute, and then have a great plan, then Notre Dame will have enough success. And they don't have to run for 250 yards in this game. They just have to run, in my opinion, Vince, for enough yards to keep them honest, to create some opportunities in the pass game. Because